All right, now let's discuss this. We are now joined via Zoom by the director of the Women's Legal Centre, Seehaam Samaai. Seehaam, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Of course, it's been an 8-year journey. I mean, on many levels, this is good news. I mean, for many years, South African courts have struggled to give some form of legal framework as it relates to Muslim marriages. So what's your reaction to this constitutional court, finding that both the marriages and divorce acts are inconsistent with the constitution of this country?
For the Women's Legal Centre, as well as the many women that have come through our doors, and the women's rights activists and lawyers and advocates that have been helping us, I think for us, it's about certainty and about the fact that women can now, attend to the divorce court to be able to ensure that there's broader enforcement, as well as the solution of their marriages. There's also broad recognition, and I think that in itself gives dignity to the many women that have gone through talaqs and fasaqs, divorces, and have not received the assets or what they have contributed over the years just because the marriages were not recognized.
Talk to us about how the process is currently, as soon as an imam marries you, what are then the processes that Muslim marriages currently exercise?
Well, we all know that when they do get married, the nikah, there's a lot of requirements that will obviously follow. And then when it comes to the divorce, whether or not it's a talaq or whether or not it's a fasaq, there is also requirements. However, when it comes to where Islam also indicates that there is certain maintenance obligations, etc., when it comes to the custody, care of the children, there isn't broader enforcement. And what this process allows us is to ensure that there will be an enforcement mechanism, that there will be processes that will ensure that there's broader recognition. And we have 24 months for that. There's also the interim relief, which has been backdated or retrospectively to the 15th of December, which means that those women are not left out in the cold, that they've instituted and is before the court, by that period, and to be able to ensure that the court makes a just and equitable distribution or give a just and equitable order and ensure that there's fairness and justness in terms of the dissolution.
Now, I don't know how much of the clip that we played earlier you were listening to. My colleague interviewed a Muslim marriage advocate, and her one concern is that she doesn't know how much the court, as in the apex court, has gone far enough to recognize the Islamic system, to be able to enforce some of these changes. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, that is obviously broader issues of doctrine, and I think one of your other speakers were also speaking about this matter was not about, the enforcement of doctrine. And then when we start speaking about broader issues, those issues is up for the legislation. It's not possibly for a court to be able to make those particular findings. It has to go to the polity and to be able to bring in those issues that she has discussed, which is around maintenance, which is around the dissolution of the property, which is around the custody and the contact and the care and the guardianship of the children. That is for legislation, that is for regulation, and we need to be able to be part of that particular process. It is not easy. We didn't say that it will be quick. Even any divorce will not, whether or not it's in terms of civil or even in terms of the recognition of Customary Marriages Act, sadly it takes a long period, but at least we know that there is processes that has to be put in place to ensure that there will be a beginning and an end.
Now, let's talk about those timelines. I mean, as you've rightfully mentioned, Al-Jamaa saying that, Parliament now has 24 months, but they've actually had 6 years to amend some of these legislations. So you mentioned also an interim relief in the process while we wait for Parliament to come back after 24 months, which will be 2024. So how important are these interim measures, especially as it relates to concerns around the rights of women and children, affected in the Muslim marriages, especially when we talk about marriage dissolvement?
Yes. Well, what is the interim relief? If your Muslim marriage existed in terms of Sharia on the 15th of December, then you can have your marriage dissolved now in terms of the Divorce Act. And so the provisions of the Divorce Act will apply to those marriages. And also the provision, because even though we argued differently in terms of the out of community of property, the court has accepted that the nature of the marriage is out of community of property. And then the dissolution can be done in terms of another provision of the Divorce Act, which speaks to the assets regardless of when the marriage was concluded. And so in the case also of husbands who is espoused in more than one Muslim marriage, the court also indicated that they can consider all relevant circumstances, including the agreements that were between the parties. Let us just, with regard to the interim relief also, the administration and implementation of the order, the Master's Office have also been given a clear direction to deal with the dissolution of properties. And when we speak about interim, unless you're seeking to a divorce your spouse, from your spouse, there's nothing in law that you need to do. The state is currently busy with 2 legislative development processes, which is firstly the omnibus legislation, which is before the Department of Home Affairs. And then we also have the legislation relating to the single marriages.
Seehaam, thank you so much for that. I think this is where we have to leave it. Very interesting, insights from you. And of course, we'll be watching Parliament to see, how they then finalize this process, which will ultimately take another 2 years. Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you.
All right, that was Seehaam Samaai. Of course, very important, their ruling by the Constitutional Court.